I'll let you into a little secret about how our evenings normally go.
Oh, good grief.
Don't panic, anybody.
You don't know what it's like to be a girl at that age, obviously. But I remember what it's like,
yes.
No, I said that before, didn't I? Or is that okay?
Well, that's what you're going to do.
Oh, right, okay, that's fine.
I don't like you're going to break into song. Colourways series Tay. Who's Tay?
Who's Tay?
Kay takes
A new
you
team member.
video show featuring
Me?
the only way that I could get her to sleep is by putting on time team that you want to use.
You can't say that. You can't say it.
Welcome, everybody, to the Bakery Bears video show. It's about a month ago that we started Kay's new show, My Favourite Colourways. And my goodness, we're absolutely thrilled how much you all enjoyed it. We had so many messages, as we said last episode, that we're delighted to bring it back for another special little show, except it's not that little. It's rather big and rather special, because one of the things that so many of you guys were asking for was you'd love to see a speckled yarn.
Speckles.
So what do you think we're doing today? Yes, it's tonals. No, it's not. Of course, we're delighted to do speckles, because you did tonals last time, didn't you? Was it?
No.
I see, I
didn't
lose
do
track.
tonals.
How many different types of is there loads?
Well, last time I did like a watercolour-y sort of effect.
Right.
Which was kind of a cross between a tonal and a variegated. But
Right.
there's solids.
Right.
Then there's tonals. Within solids, there's kind of semi-solids, isn't there? Tonals. And then you get variegated, and then you get speckled. And you can have combinations of all of those, really.
Wow. Gosh, there's so much. You just don't realise. And of course, in this series, in the My Favourite Colourways series, Tay? Who's Tay?
Who's Tay?
Kay takes
A new team member.
I swapped around. My goodness, is that a new team member? I feel like I'm in Woolworths. Oh,
I miss Woolworths.
Woolworths.
Do you remember Woolworths? I think Woolworths might exist still in some countries.
I have an inkling.
Is that right?
Yeah. It was
very
tragic.
jealous if you've got a Woolworths.
And look,
a Woolies in this country.
So many people as well, when you say things like this, sometimes you'll be talking to people and you say, oh, I miss Woolworths. And they go, oh, yeah, but how much did you shop there? Loads.
We shopped loads. We had one in town.
Have you
I know. It was where like Next is now, isn't it?
I used to go all the time.
Yeah, we used to go all the time.
And
I used to
not just then, my whole life.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to get stationery from there. I used to get children's toys. They were really good for that.
But what was it best for, Kate?
Sweets.
Yes.
It was brilliant.
If you wanted quality sweets, that's the place you went to.
Woolies.
But look, we haven't just got My Favourite Colourways for you today, coming later on in the show. Because 16 months ago, I started, I don't want to say journey, because that's annoying.
We don't like being on journeys.
16 months ago, I started doing something which has now ended. It doesn't sound as fun as journey.
No,
but it's true.
Voyage. Voyage is a better word, isn't it?
Yeah. So, yes, I started my voyage into my second colourwork garment.
Yeah.
And today, that voyage pretty much comes to an end.
Yes,
If only
my buttons had been delivered.
Yes.
I've ordered some really special buttons for it, which they're bound to come today. I'm expecting the buttons any day. I've ordered some really special buttons for it, but it's finished apart from the buttons. No, I'm keeping the buttons a surprise.
Oh, yes. I know, how exciting is that? So I don't know what the buttons are. Am I going to be thrilled?
Yes.
Oh, that's made my day.
These are custom buttons.
Custom buttons?
Yes.
You designed them? No. Sorry, I took it a step further.
No, not really.
That's fine. I
not
apologise.
really, but they're custom made.
I can't wait to see them. And it's been a really interesting road that I've travelled this year with regards to the Claire Quad, because I think it's important to remember it is only my second colour work garment, and I've learned an awful lot about what I like, what I don't like, and what I think the future should be. And actually, yesterday, the final Return to the Centre of the Yoke, my monthly garment knitting show, the final episode went out. Kay's Hands, of course, made a special guest appearance.
Did they?
Yes.
Right.
Because, as we spoke about last time, we showed the way that we approached it,
the
steeking process.
Steeking.
So that's available now, so you can go and watch that. But don't fret, because once we've settled what I'm doing next, I'll be running a whole new series starting from August.
Yeah, it's only got one garment on the go now, and you're approaching the end of that one, aren't you,
I really am. It's just, it's exciting times.
Yeah.
I'll let you into a little secret about how our evenings normally go.
Oh, good grief.
Don't panic, anybody. We're not that exciting. What normally happens is we normally get sat down and we normally put the telly on. And
it's not even the telly.
Well, no, we don't watch telly. I mean, how many people are now like this?
We don't really watch the TV.
We put the iPad on, and we watch whatever it is that we're watching. It's the only time we ever really sit down together and watch anything.
It is.
So we sit down and we put the telly on, and then Kay goes to sleep. That's how it goes. And Kay, she'll quite...
I think not immediately. I don't go to sleep immediately.
Depends what we're watching. Normally, that's what happens. Well, that's not been happening for the last few nights, and I shall tell you for why. Because we've been watching a programme on the BBC called The Secret She Keeps.
Yes.
And I've never seen Kay so wired watching a programme before in my life.
Oh, it was good.
And the reason why she was wired was...
Lady Edith, isn't it?
But what was she doing?
Oh my goodness, she is a bad, bad woman.
She was stealing babies.
She was stealing babies.
And isn't it funny how that clearly plays into the maternal...
Yeah, I think anybody who's a mum, and probably anybody who isn't a mum as well, I think it just really tugs at your heart, and you... Oh my goodness, it's just, it absolutely had me riveted, and you enjoyed it as well.
Absolutely. The only way that I could get her to sleep is by putting on Time Team.
Afterwards, yeah. We'd watch an episode of that, and I was like this.
Time Team is like the best.
He had to put Time Team on to send me to sleep.
It's the perfect way. I mean...
Works every time.
It's definitely worth a watch.
Definitely worth a watch. It was really, really good. It had me gripped right from the beginning.
Yeah.
And, to the point where I was like stopping knitting. And it must be a gripping thing, mustn't it? If you can't knit while you're watching it.
We've now actually moved on to another... What we said was...
This is an Apple production, isn't it?
Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
And we looked at these two programmes and we saw that one had Lady Edith and one had Lady Mary in.
Yeah.
And we're like, okay, we'll watch them both and we'll see which one was best.
See who's best, Lady Edith or Lady Mary.
Both have got children in, both are mothers.
Yeah, that's right. Yes. And both, this one's been really good as well, hasn't it?
Tremendous, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've now watched it's the second thing that we're watching on Apple TV Plus, and...
Very, very professional, very well done, very well acted. Yeah, classy's a good word.
Yeah.
And what's this one called?
It's called...
Defending Jacob.
I should have let you flounder for a bit and see what you came up with.
I was going to say Saving Private Ryan. No. Defending Jacob. And Jacob's their son.
Yes.
And in it, Lady Mary plays an American. And I'm saying Lady Mary. Michelle Dockery.
Can I just say, though, something? I don't know what it is, but for the first time ever in my life as a parent, I'm sort of struggling with the whole girl becoming a woman thing. Yeah,
that really has just sort of started to happen with Bryony. I've just noticed it only sort of in the past few months that she's sort of noticing, actors and things like that, and I think it's sweet. She's nearly 15, and it's really sweet to see.
This is where I think, as a mother, you have to step up.
Why? What do you mean?
Because I can't.
Well, no. Yeah, I mean, you don't know what it's like to be a girl at that age, obviously. But I remember what it's like,
Yes.
it doesn't seem that long ago, although it's quite a long time ago. But I can remember what it feels like to sort of be looking at these sort of actors and things and going, oh, lovely.
So that's why it's very important that Kay steps up here, which she has been doing, and I definitely take a big step back because I do find it rather difficult.
Yeah.
Look, that's enough, because there's way too many exciting things to see today. There really is, actually. Wow. Because the yarn I'm knitting my socks with is just beautiful.
I don't know which socks we're talking about.
Well, you'll find out later.
Okay.
Because now it's time for me to ask Kay Jones, what's on your needles?
So the first thing is I
like the pinky.
Yeah, the wrap that I've designed that will be the next platinum pattern. And
when does that come out, Kay?
It comes out at the beginning of September.
Right.
And I'm getting close to the end of this now. The thing with sort of wraps and scarf type things is they need to be much longer than you ever imagine they need to be.
Yeah, I remember when I knit the scarf.
Yeah. I think, when it's a shawl, it's sort of different, isn't it? I don't think shawls really need to be as long as like a scarf or a wrap needs to be. So every time I've sort of gone through a chunk of this, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I'm near the end, and then I sort of measure it and put it around my neck and thinking, no, I'm not. But I am now quite close to the end, so I'll show you where I'm up to. It's difficult to sort of hold up, but
it looks beautiful.
Yeah, this is the sort of striped section, which goes on and kind of on. And then we've got, if you remember, I started with that dusky pink, and I think I was only kind of here maybe when I showed it to you before, and I've done all of this and all of this. So it's really long now, and I'm aiming for the length to be round about, I think it'll be sort of 75 inches, something like that, which I think is a great length to sort of wrap around. But I've sort of been putting it around my neck. I'll just move back a bit. And just sort of laying it around and having this is one end here, and then thinking where I want the other end to be. So it'll be, if you look, this brown section here, fawny section, is going to match with this one, and then there'll be pink like that. So it'll be a really nice length. It'll come, if you just put it around your neck, it's well below your hips. So I think that'll be a great length too, if you want to sort of have one end short and then wrap this end around. I think it'll be really lovely. And once it's blocked as well, it'll be much wider than it is, because it's got a sort of rib thing, a little bit of a rib thing going on, not really, but it's got sort of pearl stitch divides, which at the minute is sort of sucking it in. So when I block it, that'll stay all lovely and blocked out. But this design was inspired by some baby blankets that my mum knit Bryony before she was born, and then after she was born. I've got 4 in different colours, and they've got this kind of motif going on. This is a bulky weight yarn, a chunky weight, so I think it really does add a lot of texture to it, and really nice. And it's I think how many row repeats? It's a 6-row repeat, and it's brilliant because it takes me about 20 minutes to knit 6 rows. So it's a great project to, if you've only got that little bit of time, even if you've only got 20 minutes a day, you can get through a repeat. And I think that feels like you've achieved something if you can sort of get through something completely. It's great for those sort of little bits of time when, dinner might be cooking and you've just got to wait for it, and you've got to be in the kitchen just to hang around. Then you can just quickly knit a few rows on it. I think it'll be really nice for that. And it'll be, because it's coming out in September, by the time that you've knit it, we're going to be into the colder weather, hopefully, and you'll have something warm and snuggly for when the real winter comes. So I'm knitting this, I should say, out of Rico Essentials Mega Wool Chunky. And I've used 3 different colours. It's colours 1, 2 and 3, strangely. The colourway numbers are 1, 2 and 3. The white is 1, I think. I can't remember which way around the pink and the sort of fawny colours are. And it's really lovely yarn. I'll take this off now because it's quite warm, actually. It's really warm around my neck. So yeah, it's a really lovely yarn. It's a mixture of 55% virgin wool, 45% acrylic. But, yes, it's got a good amount of acrylic in it, but it doesn't feel acrylic-y. It's super soft. There's no itch at all. It's really lovely. It's been really nice to knit with. It's got quite a tight twist. So when you're doing like the cables and the lace, I've not had any yarn splitting at all. It's never been splitty. I have had a few knots, although the last 2 balls that I wound didn't have any knots at all. So, but then like I think the 2 or 3 balls before that all had knots. It's fine, you know, if there was a knot, I just cut it out and I've rejoined the yarn and I'll just weave in the ends. I think, you know, I would say to people, if you're thinking of buying this, I would definitely recommend it, but just be aware you might have a few knots. So I'm going to get this finished. I still haven't got a name for it, so I really need to get my thinking cap on.
Well,
for that.
Yeah, I always think with names, it comes at the right time. It comes at the moment that it should come, and
yeah,
you know,
I mean,
sometimes
maybe
that
it'll
comes
be when
quick,
it's finished.
and sometimes
yeah, I have got one name in my head, but I'm not set on it entirely, so I'll just see what happens when it's finished and I photograph it, and then something might, you know, the location it's been photographed in might inspire me actually.
Yeah, look, I want to
Dan
show my
Jones.
socks. Yes.
What's on your needles?
Well, it's the Village Fete socks.
Oh.
And since you've seen this last, I've knitted like properly into the pattern, and I've got to say I absolutely love it. Look.
Aww.
It's like my favourite because
nice in that yarn.
I really, really love the lace, and this to me it feels like proper lace, even though I'm sure it isn't. But
it's a simple lace.
Oh yeah. But it reminds me of like the speargrass knitting that I did, and I'm finding it really engaging because there's a 4 round repeat, and it's like changing just a little bit every time, so it's keeping me properly engaged. Because you were worried.
Yeah, I'm surprised.
You were worried that I'd find it too.
You normally like something a bit more going on.
This has just been perfect. I mean, it really has been perfect. And then on the back, there's the lovely maypole going up the back. And it's the first time ever that I've knitted something in yarn which I can't knit with at night.
Yes, dark yarn.
And to start with, I was a bit frustrated by that. But then I'm not at all, because it sort of slots in lovely into a bit of knitting time that I get on a late afternoon. And so that's when I've been doing it.
And then the back.
And, you know, at no point have I found it a chore. Every other sock, up until I knit the Nutkin socks and realised, no, Whispers in the Walls. Up until I knit the Whispers in the Walls and I realised the formula that sort of went in nicely for me, I'm just loving every moment of knitting socks. I need now to sort of line up. But you've got one of... No, I don't say anything.
I've got a few things on the go. That's all I'm saying. Got a few things going on under the radar. Under the radar.
So perhaps I don't need to worry.
No, you don't need to worry.
I'll shut up.
Yeah, you don't need to worry.
Well, that's good news, and that's good news for everyone out there too. Oh yes.
But the yarn is Austermann Step.
And I've not knitted with this before. I don't think.
You haven't. That's why I chose it.
Yeah.
And the colour is 0132. And it's this lovely mix of purples. I think it's really nice.
It's definitely not something you want to knit when you're tired and it's slightly dark.
No, it's slightly lovely in the light. You can see all the different tones. And then I chose this for the heels and toes. You don't have to do contrast toes if you don't want to.
I will.
I thought this went lovely, and it's one of the little My First Reggio, which I don't even know whether they still produce these. They're 25 gram balls of the normal sort of Reggio yarn. This one is 01886, and it's this gorgeous sort of violet colour. Isn't that pretty? I think the two together are just lovely.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's, I think, have I only done contrast heels and toes once?
I don't know.
Because that's when I tried to proclaim that I'd invented it. Do you remember?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
That was really funny.
No one else has ever done that before.
I was like, oh my goodness, this is the best thing ever. And I'm sure I have only done it once. And you've got a cool way, haven't you? I'm sure you've done a thing on this. And I'm sure, did I do this before, where you don't cut the yarn?
I don't cut the yarn.
Yes.
No.
I love that. Anytime there's an opportunity to not cut yarn, that's something that
I think generally
appeals to me.
Although saying that, I did watch someone's tutorial recently on contrast heels, and they did cut the yarn. and reattach it. And I was really surprised. So maybe not everyone does do that, but no,
why would you cut it if you can make it look beautiful?
If you don't have to cut it, I prefer not to. And it's very, very easy not to have to cut your contrast yarn. Not your contrast yarn, your main colour yarn. Of course, you've got to cut your contrast yarn, your main colour.
Yeah, can you imagine carrying your contrast yarn right the way down the foot to the toe?
I don't like carrying yarns, actually, generally. Do you know, if you like... It's why I don't like alternating yarns, and I won't do it. Do you know, if you like knitting a garment...
Right.
And it's why I don't knit garments in hand-dyed yarn, because I just won't alternate. I just don't like doing it. I know there's this kind of spirally way of doing it, isn't there, where it doesn't show up on the inside.
And you're supposed to do that when?
Well, if you're working in the round...
And you're knitting a garment.
Yeah, you alternate it every round.
Right.
So you'd knit with one ball for one round, the other ball with the next round. And you have to twist. It's to stop it pooling.
Right.
To stop, because hand-dyed yarn from one skein to the next, maybe slightly different shades.
It would be if you're knitting a garment with hand-dyed yarn.
Yes.
Right.
Not commercial.
That's never going to happen.
No, well, it's never going to happen to me either, because I just won't ever do it. Whenever I do knit garments, I always use a commercial yarn, all the same dye lot, to avoid that, because I just can't be doing with it. No.
Also, as well, can you imagine how expensive that would be?
It's very expensive. A lot of people do it. A lot of people do it.
That's great. I mean, go for it. But
it is a very expensive thing to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I suppose if I'd spent all that money...
Yeah, that's absolutely what people think. I think, if you're going to spend that money, then you might as well spend the time in making sure that it doesn't sort of colour block with the different balls.
Yeah.
I think there's just so much thinking going on. And I'm like, especially if you've got a pattern, even if it's a plain jumper, you've still got increases and things like that. And then you've got to think, I've got to alternate and all that business. And I would rather knit with like a commercial yarn and have something going on pattern-wise.
Yeah.
To keep my interest.
Yeah.
And I just don't think I would wear... Especially if it was a variegated yarn, I wouldn't wear it. I'm more of a plain...
I've only got limited experience knitting garments. I think I've done 5 now. And I have to say that I wouldn't change the approach with regards to the yarn choices that we've taken. Because if I think about the Solia and, the choices that you can make with the sort of bold colour differences. But then also the plain stuff. I think about the Samantha and the yarn we use for the Samantha. There's so many great choices.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of...
Which are affordable.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? And
produce a hard-wearing, long-term, great product.
Yeah, and I think I'd be so precious with it, because of the time and the effort and the money that had gone into it. I'd be worried about wearing it.
Yeah. I'd much rather knit socks and hats and gloves and maybe, if I'm feeling very out there, a cowl.
Cowl's okay with hand-dyed. I'll knit anything else in hand-dyed yarn.
Yes.
But just not garments. That's just not my thing.
What else is on your needles?
I've got a pair of socks too.
Nice.
This is a pair that I cast...
I really like these.
Yes, there's a pair that I cast on for Dan. And these are going to be his Christmas socks this year. I wanted... Because Dan was knitting with the Merino yak, the Regia Merino yak. And you still are.
I always will be from now on.
I know, I got jealous and I had to cast on a pair of socks using that yarn, and I showed you I'd bought a load of it last time. And I chose a colour, and actually the colour that Dan was knitting the Whispers socks out of, or you have knit the Whispers socks out of, there's some left, and I'm going to use that as the contrast for the heels. This is the one that Dan used. And I'm knitting him some socks using a sort of reddish colour, a rusty red. So this is the Regia Merino yak 4-ply that we've spoke about many times now. And the colour that I'm knitting with for the main sort of body of the sock, I can't remember the colourway name, but it's 07507. And it's this lovely sort of, I don't know, what, rusty red maybe? It's just a really lovely shade of red. Can you see all the sort of heathering that goes on in it? It's so lovely. And I think it's because the yak must dye differently, I think, to the wool, and that's why you get the different tones. And I've cast on a sock, and I've put a bit of texture in it just to add a bit of interest. I'm not too far in, but this is where I'm up to. So it's got a sort of knit pearl texture that looks a bit like bricks or a wall, or I'm not quite sure what it looks like. It's just knits and pearls, just improvised. And I'm putting in an afterthought heel with these, so I've worked down, and you can see I've put in markers on the other side, here and here. This is where my afterthought heel will be cut in. The leg on this one, I didn't want to do really short socks because it'll be winter, but I didn't want to do super long either, so I've gone for sort of a middly length. I'm not sure how far that is, 5 inches maybe. And then the heel will be here, and so now I'm just working down the foot, doing the pattern on the front and plain on the back. And then I'll add a toe. I don't think I'll do contrast toes. I think I'll just do contrast heels. I think that'll be nice. You know, I'm not in any rush for these at all. I've just been working on these a little bit, sort of, you know, late afternoonish, early evening, just for sort of half an hour or so every day. But I just love this yarn. I mean, even just in stocking stitch, look how lovely it is. Isn't it gorgeous with all those tones? And I'm using 2.5mm for these, just to give them a bit more coziness and squishiness. And I do often use 2.5mm for Dan's socks because he's got bigger feet. But with this yarn as well, it's just so plump and squishy and lovely. It's gorgeous. So I did a 1x1 rib. I love a 1x1 rib. And I know a lot of people don't like working 1x1 ribs, but it's just got that, for me, it's got that more slightly vintage feel, a 1x1. And in this yarn, it just looks wonderful. Look how gorgeous and neat that is. So I do enjoy a 1x1 rib. And I don't mind working it. I get kind of into a rhythm and it's fine. And I'm using my Chowgoo mini twists, which I still love. Someone did say something about these recently, actually, and said that they think that they'd redesigned the joins or something because people were having problems with them. And I haven't bought a pair in a long time, so it might be worth me just buying another pair and just seeing if they have done something different. But
why is the join bad?
No, not the join. It was something to do with, because I'm wondering if it's something to do with this being so thin here, right. Because the cable is so thin. Where it joins in, the metal portion has to be really thin at that point as well. So I don't know if they were having breakage problems or if it was bending there. I don't know. But I love them. I've got absolutely no complaints, and it's really all I use for Magic Loop socks now, these. Yeah. Just because the cable is so thin and so doesn't have a memory, like some cables I've used. The higher cable, I don't like at all. I think it's quite a thin cable, but it just seems to have this crazy memory, and it's always like doing a mad thing. The needles themselves are nice, although they are a bit pointy for me. But I find these perfect, the Chowgoo. They've got a gorgeous tip, lovely and tapered, nice and pointy, but not so that you could commit a murder with them. And just the cable's gorgeous. I don't have a problem with the join. I always tighten them. These are interchangeables. I always tighten them with the higher grips, and that's never a problem. So I've never really had an issue with them. I love them. So,
the yarn's perfect too, and it would just be wrong.
It's really nice. A gorgeous colour, this, isn't it?
It is.
Lovely, rich colour.
How does it wear?
Well, Bryony's got a pair. I knit my Whispers in the Walls sample, the pattern sample with this yarn, and she's got a pair. It's not one of her most worn pairs, and I think it's just because it's a solid colour, and she always gravitates to ones that are stripy or bright, or but she has worn them a few times, and I've washed them a couple of times in the washer, and they still look great. So I can't comment on sort of their long-term wear, because like I said, she hasn't worn them months and months like some of her socks that she does. But once Dan's worn these ones,
we'll know
for a few months. I'll be able to come back and tell you exactly how
I hope it wears really well. I feel like it should.
I hope they wear well too. I don't see why it shouldn't, because it's got a good amount of nylon. It's 58% wool, 14% yak, and 28% nylon.
Right.
So it's a good amount of nylon in there. So there's no reason why it wouldn't wear well. The yak might cause them to fluff up a bit.
That's okay.
But I don't mind that. That's okay. So we'll come back to you at some point and let you know how these actually wear once they've been worn a lot. Hopefully it'll be good.
Do you ever get your... What are these called again?
Row counters.
Do you ever get your row... my brain always wants to say stitch counter.
Right.
Do you ever get your row counters mixed up?
No, but I bet
people out there.
I don't get them mixed up, but I seem to always be looking for a row counter, even though I must have about 10. I can never find them.
I just keep them in my project bags.
I don't know where they all are.
I just make sure each project bag that I'm using has got one in.
Yeah, well, you would think that would work with me, but whenever I'm looking for one, I never seem to be able to find one. But look, the one I'm using for this is one of these big clover ones. I like these, but it's really big. And if your project bag is quite small, it's a bit of a devil. But these are good. I do like these ones.
I can't believe that I didn't use them. Row counters.
Well, sometimes you don't need to. Like, technically, with this... how many... Oh, it's actually... I do need to use them with this. It's a 16-row repeat.
Oh, yeah, so it's fine. I know what I'm on.
Saying that, I probably could follow it because it's just knits and pearls.
Right.
And you could look at the row below, but that's quite a long repeat to remember, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even just knits and pearls.
Yeah.
So I do use a clicker. It's just one less thing to think about, isn't it?
Yeah, I get great sort of security now in it. And I feel that it's like any new thing, because I'd never used it before. I just had to persevere a little bit and find a way for it to work for me, because the thing that always blew my mind, and we won't, go down this rabbit hole again, is the row that I'm on.
Oh, no, don't confuse me.
I'm not going to. I'm not even going to talk about it.
Wrong.
But that's fine. I'm not going to talk about it. All I'm going to say is, when you have something, that you want to use... I mean, to be fair, I'm not really certain why I started. I think you were quite sort of persuasive for me to try it. I must have been making mistakes.
Well, yeah.
Or perhaps it was colour work.
It wouldn't have been colour work. Why would it have been?
Double knitting.
Oh, double knitting. Oh, to follow like you wrote. Oh, right, okay.
Charts. That might have been
it. It could have been that.
I suspect it probably was a necessity.
When you were doing that double knitting chart, I think that's right. I don't think you were using one, and I kept saying to you, how on earth do you know where you are?
It was because I was like ticking stuff off, and it was just a nightmare. So I started using it, and then it filtered into everything else, and it is perfect. So if you've perhaps seen something that you think, oh yeah, I'd like to give that a go, you've only had one little go with it and it's not really worked for you, maybe don't discard it. Maybe just persevere just a little bit, because if I hadn't, it's just wonderful now. It's so much more. I can focus more on this than on ticking things off and putting lines through things and all sorts.
Yeah, me too.
And the reason why I mentioned my clicker is because I nearly got it mixed up with...
Gosh, that'd be a disaster,
which
wouldn't it?
really would have been a disaster. Yeah. Because, of course, I'm using it here because this is the Norwegian count.
I would not want to rip back colour work.
No. It's a free pattern. It's lovely. And I'm now into the longer repeats. I've got to say, I love the patterning down here. I think it's really well put together. So nice. What an idiot.
What have you done?
Oh, I've just done a couple of greens when I should have done... Oh, maybe it's on the joint.
It's a snowflake, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. Well, it's a free pattern.
It's a free pattern, so I can show you, yeah. It's a snowflake.
Definitely worth a download.
Yeah.
And a cast on.
Definitely.
Because whilst the 4-row sort of... Well, is it 4... Not rows, it's stitches. Is it 4 stitch repeats in the first instance? Yes, it is. The 4 stitch repeats down here are like easy peasy. It's like bang, 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 off we go. And then you filter into the 12 stitch repeats. And initially, when you first start doing those 12 stitch repeats, it's like, whoa.
That's a lot more than 12.
Yeah, it is. Sorry.
That's way more than 12. I haven't counted them, but it's a lot more.
I bet it's like 32. It's harder work, and I know that you could totally put in markers. You could, and maybe I'll keep considering that. But I sort of quite like the challenge.
26.
I sort of quite like the challenge of getting through that. And so far it's working great. Because, do you know what I think it is? What I found is if you can find rhythm in the pattern, then that plays into my whole drumming thing, and then I'm off. and everything's great. Sometimes I can't find rhythm, and I think it's the same for all of us. Perhaps those are the patterns which are like, oh, that knitted itself. Because it had rhythm, you know. It has rhythm, this pattern, and I didn't expect it to, because the first couple of rounds of 26 were hard.
I bet they were, yeah.
Challenging, most definitely. The colourways are lovely, and it's the Queen Mary's Rose and the Rose Garden Green. Boom.
Well done.
Which Kay dyed for me years ago.
It's a DK weight, just 100% merino.
And it's lovely. And it's like when Kay holds my colour work, it's like she's holding a small child.
I know. I do love colour work I think it's lovely in... I'm not going to lose your stitches.
It's fine.
It's so nice in, like, tonals, I think.
Yeah.
This is one... The green is a tonal and the pink is like a tonal with speckles.
Yeah.
It just looks so pretty, doesn't it? This is my kind of thing, definitely. I love the look of it.
It's classy. You know, it's just a really nice thing to work with. Everything's lovely on it, you know. And I couldn't really ask for anything more from this type of project. And I think sometimes when you look at, certainly for me, and this is an error on my part, and I've learned something here, when you sort of look at and you consider cowl knitting, I sometimes think that's boring because there's nothing going on with it. Well, how wrong can you be?
I love knitting cowls. I don't think they're boring.
And also, how lovely and wearable.
But it's such a practical, wearable thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's kind of like socks for me, knitting cowls, because I like the simplicity of it, you know.
The beauty of a sock, though, is you've got the heel turn and the toe, and you've got all those elements which make it more of a...
That's true. But I think when you've knit a lot of socks, you know, I've knit a lot of socks now, so it is more of a, like, comfort knit for me. The fingering weight cowls that I've knit, I absolutely love them.
What I'm really pleased about with this is I'm really pleased about
your colour work's very good. Yeah, I mean, your floats and everything. It's very even. There's no puckering.
Being washed and blocked yet.
No, it's not even been blocked yet. So yeah, it's lovely.
And if you think
I love this corrugated bit at the bottom here.
It's clever, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lovely.
What I found is, just in the limited colour work, you know, knitting that I've done, when you have a sort of repeating pattern like this, you can get into a routine where you can sort of, you know, really nail the yarn dominance, keep everything nice and flat. Where it gets challenging is when you've only got like a few rows of that, and then it changes, and then it changes, and then it changes, and that's when I find it much more, I've got to think about it much more to not start getting things puckering and pulling and all sorts. And I'm so pleased that I've concentrated on this, and I've not rushed it, and I've done it right, and so far I think this is the best colour work knitting I've done.
They're so pretty, look, the colours together, I think.
They're beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's my Norwegian cowl, and I am really, really enjoying knitting this, and I highly recommend the pattern. It's really easy to read and it's free, so go give it a go.
Happy days.
Yes. What else are you knitting?
Well, the last thing, it is a big bag. I've had to put this into a larger bag because it's now so big. It's in my fabulous Harry Potter bag that my lovely Sasha made me. And if you remember, she made loads of these that we used as prizes when we were doing the Swish and Flick knit along. So I love this bag. It's huge and it just fits the project perfectly. And it's my shawl. It's my Cowboys and Angels shawl, and it smells lovely in here because I've got one of Sherry's lavender bags. These are everywhere. Sherry, if you're watching, I put these everywhere because she always sends them, you know, we purchase when you've bought things, and it's just fantastic. So I stash them into like boxes of yarn, I put them into project bags, I put them into like clothes drawers, everything just, you know, you open up your project and you just get a lovely waft of lavender. It's great, and it keeps the bugs away as well. This is my Cowboys and Angels shawl. Did I say that? I'm sorry if I did. It's by, is it Isabel Kramer? Yes, Isabel Kramer. And I'm getting close to the end. It's a DK weight shawl, but I'm knitting it with 2 strands of fingering weight held together in effectively 4 different colours. I'm very close to the bottom ribbing now. So let's see how well I can show this. I might need your help actually. I don't know if that's possible. It's scrunched up like crazy on the needles, but look, I was sort of here last time, I think, and I've done all of this. I'll hold it a bit closer in a second. I wanted you to see sort of the size and just how big it's going to be. Aren't the colours just gorgeous though? Oh, I think it's looking so lovely. So I'll fold it up now and just show you exactly where I'm up to. And I've paused on this. I was going great guns, and you know the rows are so long. Oh my goodness. I think I've got about 350 stitches, something like that. Which on a a DK weight, 350 stitches, that's a good amount of stitches, isn't it? For size wise, it's going to be huge. So it was taking me a long time to do a row, but I was working on it every day, just doing a few rows every day, and I was making really good progress. And now I'm getting close to doing the final set of bubbles. Can you see there's a row of bubbles here, and then another section of this sort of lattice lace, which I got through with not a single mistake. 350 stitches lace. I was thinking, oh gosh, this is going to be touch and go, and you've got increases going on still, but I got through it fine. It didn't make a single error, so I was thrilled. And you can see now I think I'm a row away from doing the bobbles again. And I had a problem after I did this huge long row of bobbles, and this row I'm going to do now is even longer because they've got more stitches. But I did that bobble row, and it took me a long time. I don't know how long it took me to do that bobble row, but I didn't think anything of it. But the next morning I woke up and my shoulder had done its crochet shoulder thing, and I thought, this is weird. I haven't been crocheting, I hadn't crocheted for a few days. I woke up with this pain I always get. I was like so frustrated. I thought, I don't know what's going on. I can't do anything without getting this pain. And then Dan said to me, look, let's think about what you did yesterday. What did you do? It must have been something that you did yesterday. And the only thing knitting wise that I did was I did that bobble row. And when you work bobbles, you have to turn your work, don't you? And then sort of purl those few stitches and then turn back again and do the decrease. And I think because the shawl's now really heavy, it must have been all of the lifting and turning, constantly turning it, knitting back, turning again. It must have been all that did my shoulder in. So I left it for a few days until that calmed down, and then I worked on it to do the lace, and I was fine doing that. I didn't have any pain. It was okay. So it's obviously not the long rows, it was these lovely bobbles. So that's why I've paused, because I know now I've got to do that again.
Now,
so
if ever there was a project, because we've been talking a lot about this, obviously trying to work out what was causing Kay's pain, and she was talking me through certain elements to this, and there's no way I think I could ever knit this, because it seems to me that the process that you have to go through to create what is a beautiful looking garment, to me, doesn't seem remotely pleasurable. It's
not now, I'll be honest, but I knew I would get to this stage because I don't like really long rows.
There's some really frustrating repeats though, aren't there?
I've been knitting 30 minutes and I've not got to the end of a row. That's not fun for me. That is just not fun.
It's because the repeats are so frustrating.
It was not difficult, but I found I had to concentrate the whole time I was doing it. Even on the reverse rows, because it's not just a plain purl back row. So even on those rows, I was concentrating, because you can tell on those rows if you've made an error on the previous row. So, it just took a lot of concentrating to do this section. Even though it doesn't look very much in the fabric, does it, really?
This or this?
The lattice work.
It does look a lot. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, you've got a big section. I'm holding this upside down, but you understand what I'm talking about.
There's
a huge section up here, but the rows were much, much shorter.
You cannot say that it's not stunning.
oh no, I can't wait to finish it. And that's what's keeping me going. And the thing that's kept me going is because I've used the yarns I've used. I knew that if I knit this in just one solid colour or two solid colours, I would have just got bored. But because I'm holding fingering weights double, it just produces, I think it's just so pretty.
What I find so interesting about this project, though, is I think it plays into discussions we've had recently, which is, when you're deciding on a project to knit, what do you think about? And for me, I'm always going to think about, am I going to enjoy knitting it?
Yeah, well,
there's no way I would ever enjoy knitting something like that.
But I knew going into it, I would get to that point when it got really big at the end. I knew, because I know myself as a knitter, and I knew that I would have to plough through that last bit.
Because what you're after is the finished.
I want the finished thing.
Yes.
I am a product knitter, really. I'm primarily a product knitter, except when it comes to things like socks. I love the process of socks. I'm a combination, I would say, really.
You see, I wonder if product knitters perhaps produce the best work sometimes.
I don't know.
Because you're wading through.
Yeah.
You told me, I mean, it's a paid for pattern, so, obviously Kay can't say out loud what they were, but Kay told me some of the repeats on this, and I just wouldn't have even started it. Which was the one where you said, it's something like you've been doing, but it's over and over and over again? It'll
be the lace. Yeah,
Look at it. It's absolutely...
It's gorgeous.
Mind-blowingly gorgeous.
It's not difficult.
And sometimes you've got to go through the pain.
It isn't difficult, but you can see looking at it, there's lots of crossed stitches, and it was those that were really doing my head in.
It does. I do find it hard, because I find myself torn, because I look at those cross stitches and I know what you had to do to knit them.
Do know,
I know how much it would absolutely make me want to jump out the window, but then there's part of me which, it
looks so lovely, though, doesn't it? That's what was keeping me going.
I think your
seeing it appear underneath my needles, thinking it just looks so pretty. It was a challenge, and I love a challenge.
Yeah,
I love a challenge. I'm bored if I've not got a challenge in some
this is definitely
aspect. It's a challenge it's not a challenge in terms of my upping my skills. It's a mental challenge in sort of perseverance for me.
Yeah. And it makes me start to think perhaps a day could come where I might be more of a product knitter.
Yeah. Because I wish I was more of a process knitter. I do wish I was more of a process knitter, but you are what you are, I suppose, aren't you? And thinking back, the reason I started knitting again, Mum taught me when I was young I could knit, and I never touched it until I was 34 when I had Bryony, and I wanted to make her a bear. And I thought, well, I know how to knit, I'm going to knit her a bear. So it wasn't that I wanted to knit particularly. It's
Why would you? You hadn't been doing it.
No, it's because I wanted to produce something for her, and I wanted to make it myself, and I had the skills to do it.
You do have to wonder, if you look back through history, if the majority of knitters knitted for the product.
Well, I think a lot of people did because they got paid, didn't they? It was a lot of people knit because it was their job, or because they knit because they needed the clothes.
Process knitting is probably, I'm sure people have always, once they've started knitting, they'll have enjoyed the process.
Yeah.
But process knitters like me are probably much more of a 20th or 21st century
Very possibly,
thing,
because it's become more of a pleasure activity, hasn't it, rather than something that you've got to do because you need the finished product
and that
for one reason or another.
It does then sort of bring you round to the sort of thought process of, when you're knitting something, should you actually be, considering, are you going to enjoy it, and the yarns and all those things, but should you also be considering, what do I already own? E.g., I've got 50 shawls already. We don't, by the way. This is just an example.
No.
I've got 50 shawls already. Should I be knitting another one?
Well,
do you know what I mean?
If you're going to enjoy it, then I would say yes. If this is the thing that you enjoy doing,
but
you want to knit.
We talk though all the time, don't we?
50 more shawls. I do. I said just recently, I've got a cupboard full of knitted things, and realistically, you can't possibly wear them all, can you, all the time? And you get to the point, I think you do get to like a saturation point.
And we are famous for gifting things, so don't think we're not.
we give away such a lot.
Much.
And I think a lot of knitters give away a lot, don't they?
Because they're producing so much, there's no space in their house.
No space in your house. And that's the issue I've got at the moment, is that I've just got nowhere to store things. All of the sock drawers are full. I've got a cupboard that's just full of knitted things. I've got so many hats and so many mittens. But I really, I do enjoy knitting those things. I love, as you know, knitting socks. I love knitting mittens. I love knitting hats. And we have gifted a lot, but then you get to the point where all the relatives and all your friends have got loads of things. So it is a kind of dilemma, what do you do? And, I have donated to charity as well before, and I've done all of those things. But we carry on because we enjoy it, don't we?
Yes.
At the end of the day.
From a personal point of view, I just wonder if perhaps I need a tiny bit more balance in the way that I'm thinking about things. And what's led me to that is, looking at that makes me want to knit it. But you telling me what you had to do, I know it would do my head in.
It's a difficult thing, isn't it? I know. But, I have largely enjoyed this. All I'm not enjoying is the long rows. And
You'll enjoy the wearing of it.
Yeah, absolutely, And I'm also sweating a bit over the yarn, and I'm hoping I don't run out. But this is what I've got left of the darker shades. And all I've got to do with this is the ribbing at the bottom, and I just figure that if I get to a point where I think I'm going to run out, I'll just make the ribbing a bit shorter. If it's a couple of rows shorter, I don't think it will matter. I would say that I've probably got, there might be 25 grams each of those left. This one's Malabrigo sock in Sandbank. I think it's Sandbank. And then this one is Life in the Long Grass in Lunaza. And these were both a longer skein? Malabrigo sock is 440 yards. Lunaza is 460 yards. So they're both quite long skeins. So I know I can make that work for the bottom ribbing and it'll be okay. However, the colour I'm on now, look... Now, this is not as bad as it looks, because this I've got more of. This is Cascade Heritage in Luna Rock, and I've got some more skeins of this. So if I run out of this, it's not a problem. This one is a slightly shorter skein. It's only 437 yards, so it's a bit shorter. This one is Lay Family Yarns in Shepherd's Delight, and it's 425 metres, so again that's about 460 yards. So this one is just a bit of a shorter skein. So, and I've got this much left of the one I'm working on now, and again that's probably about 20 grams, and I've got the bubbles to do though, which takes up more yarn. So I think I've got about 4 or 5 more rows to do, so I'm really hoping I'll manage. But I'm kind of sweating a bit with the yarn, but I think it'll be okay. Keep your fingers crossed. I'm playing yarn chicken a little bit. So, but I am gonna just now get on with it, because this is another thing that I want to get finished really in the next week or so, if I can at all. But the other thing that's spurring me on is that I love knitting with these needles. It's the higher bamboos, the interchangeables, and I'm using 4.5mm. I can see it now. Shall I tell you why I can see it? I went to the opticians. I've got tweaked contact lenses. They've tweaked one of my lenses. And what they do, when you start getting this reading problem the age reading problem, is they reduce the power on one of your eyes. So basically they are making that eye better for close work, and the other eye is still good for long, and your brain makes an adjustment. He said it might take a couple of weeks, but actually they've been great, and I've had them about a week, these ones now, and I've ordered a pair of close work glasses, which will take a couple of weeks to come through. So my sight problem is resolved.
Now it's time for something lovely. How would you like to take another look through Kay's potion books? Every page packed with the secrets of another amazing colourway. We launched this show about a month ago now with the fairy wings, and the question I'm dying to find out is, what will we be dyeing today? Let's go and find out.
Over the last 6 years, I have created more colourways than I can remember. Hidden away in my library is the little book that contains nearly all my secrets. But which do I like best? Well, I thought it would be fun to find out, so in this show, that's what we're going to be doing. I'll be taking you from undyed skein to finished colourway, because it's time for us to discover Welcome everyone to another edition of my favourite colourways. I'm absolutely thrilled to be back with you today to dye up some more yarn. Now you all seem to love the first one and were asking for more, so it seemed a perfect time to just come along and show you another dye method, another colourway, and just the sort of ins and outs of my dyeing process. So I've got out my dye books again and I've been going through them, and this time I wanted to do two things. First of all, I thought it would be nice to do one of my Harry Potter colourways, because we all love Harry Potter, don't we? You know, it's always popular. I think no matter what time of year, you can guarantee that someone somewhere is watching a Harry Potter film or reading a Harry Potter book. So I wanted to do one of my Harry Potter colourways, but also a lot of you have asked to see speckling. So I went through all of the colourways and I chose one that is purely speckles. It's a colourway actually that I didn't dye up very much of. I kept a skein of it and I use it very often actually for swatching designs, sock designs, because it's a brilliant colourway for showing off any design really, because it's very delicately speckled. And the colourway I'm going to dye today is based around a head wig, and I called it A Wizard's Best Friend. I didn't dye very much of this at all, so I mean some of you out there might have it, and I think I sent one to a friend actually as a gift, so I know someone that's got one. It's a very delicate speckled yarn. I think you'll enjoy seeing just exactly how I go about that. But when I was looking through deciding, honestly, I could have dyed up all of my Harry Potter colours again, because I do love them all. And when I said to Bryony that I was going to do a Harry Potter colourway, she said, "Oh, are you going to do Remus?" Because that's her absolute favourite. I'm not going to do Remus because that one isn't a speckle. That one is a variegated. It's more of a variegated, and that's a method. The method that I use for that one is a method that I use very often for dyeing. So when I come back again, maybe to do another one, then I will show you that method, because it's not speckled and it's not the method that I showed you in the first video, which is more of like a watercolory method. It's like more of a true sort of variegated. There was actually only really a few that were purely speckled, and I decided on this one because it is very delicate, and getting delicate speckles is a tricky business, I'll be honest. It is quite tricky to get those, you know, beautiful little specks that you get without them sort of spreading into bigger speckles. Now I'm going to be dyeing on a different base today that I haven't dyed on before, which I'll talk about a bit more in a little bit when I show you my sort of equipment notions, dyeing notions. So I'm not quite sure exactly how it's going to come out, but that's the fun of dyeing, I think, you know. Even if it doesn't come out exactly as it has done on previous bases, I'm sure it's going to be absolutely lovely. And it'll be really interesting to see how it dyes up on a different base. Into my dye books I went. I've chosen, like I said, the Hedwig themed one. It's also, the other reason that I chose this is the colours that I use, although they're very delicate, they're all sort of autumnal colours. And I know we're in summer at the moment, but I'm always looking forward to the next season, particularly when the next season is going to be cooler and it's going to be autumn. So it is also a lovely colourway to be doing and looking forward to a new season. Okay, so that's enough chatter. It's time now to show you exactly what we're going to need to dye up our lovely Hedwig yarn. First thing we're going to need is some yarn. What a surprise that we're going to need some yarn to dye yarn. So I've got today 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn. This is a new to me base. I actually went to my normal supplier to get some normal sort of 75-25 sock yarn. They're completely out at the moment. They've had a sort of supply problem just with everything that's going on. So I had a hunt around and I found a base in another supplier that I've actually knit with this base before from a different independent dyer, and I recognised the base when I saw it online, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna get some of that because I know it's absolutely gorgeous to knit with, so it'd be fun to dye on it. So what I've got is fingering weight, and it's an 85-15, so it's 85% super fine superwash merino and 15% nylon, and I think there's 400 metres in it, and it's gorgeous. It's a 4-plied yarn, I believe. It looks like a 4-plied yarn, and it's lovely and plump, and it's so soft. So I've got 2 skeins of that, and what I need to do with these skeins is actually just put a little tie on each of them to make the dyeing process a whole lot easier. So I use these reusable cable ties. I've had these, you know, since I've really been sort of started dyeing, and you can just reuse them over and over. So all I'm going to do is take the skein, and I'm just going to slip the cable tie in it like that, push it through and lock it, and that's now ready for soaking. So I'll do the other one as well. If you don't have cable ties, you can just use a piece of, you know, cotton yarn, or, you know, it needs to be, when I say cotton, I don't mean sort of sewing thread, I mean sort of, you know, a sort of DK weight cotton yarn, something like that. Or string is fine as well. If you're going to use something like that though, make sure it's just a plain colour. Don't use a coloured yarn or a coloured string, because there's a chance the dye might come out of that. So I've got both of my skeins now ready for soaking. So what else are we going to need? First of all, safety first when you're dyeing. So I've got my mask. Always wear a mask when you're dyeing yarn. You know, you've got all of those powders in the air, very irritable to your lungs, so must always wear a mask. I've then got the mordant. This is called a mordant. It's basically the chemical that makes the dye stick permanently to the yarn. I use citric acid. You can use vinegar, just white vinegar. I have dyed yarn using vinegar and I didn't like it. It stinks. In all honesty, it just smells horrible. But it works perfectly fine and it's very cheap. So if you've got some in your pantry, by all means use vinegar. I'm going to use citric acid, which is a food-friendly product. There's no danger at all in using this. And then I need a pot to dye in. This is a stainless steel pot. It's kind of like a casserole sized pot. And all of your equipment that you're going to use to dye yarn, you must only use them to dye yarn. Never ever use them to sort of do anything else with food prep or anything like that after you've dyed yarn in them. Just keep everything exclusively for your yarn dyeing. So I've got a nice big stainless steel pot. I've got just a plastic bowl for soaking my yarn and for washing it afterwards. A pair of rubber gloves. Some old tea towels, again, that I only use for dyeing. I use these because I dye in my kitchen. You know, dye powder can get everywhere. I always just put down some tea towels just to keep things as clean as possible. I have my dyeing spoon, a nice big spoon. My little dyeing spoon, can't do anything without that. And then, because I'm speckling today, I'm going to need some paintbrushes. This is how I speckle yarn, using just cheap old children's paintbrushes. Don't spend any money on any sort of fancy ones, it's not necessary. I just use these that cost like, I don't know, £1 or something. They're not very expensive. Keep them again exclusively for dyeing. And then some dyes. So, you know, whatever dyes you want to use, mine are acid dyes. And I've got 2 different brands that I'm working with today. I've got Landscape dyes, I love these. It's an Australian brand. And these are actually my favourite dyes. They are granular rather than a powder, and I find that is much easier to work with. It's brilliant for speckling, and it just, you know, there's just, I don't know, it's just a more friendly product, I find. They are expensive, that's the only thing, they are quite expensive. And then the other brand I'm using is Jacquard. I've got all of the colours of these and they're brilliant. These are a very fine powder, but I've got 2 colours of jacquard and 1 of the landscapes, so it's 3 colours today that I'm going to be using for our speckling. That's everything we're going to need to dye our yarn today. So the first job to do is to get on and soak our yarn. Okay, so in my bowl, I've just got some warm tap water. I always like to soak my yarn in water that's warm. I just find that it absorbs the citric acid. It seems to sort of get very wet quicker. So that's why I just like to use warm water just from the tap. And into that, I'm going to pop in some citric acid. I don't really have a sort of formula for how much. I'm not sure what the exact ratio should be, but just from trial and error, I've found that I use about a heaped tablespoon for each 2 skeins of yarn. So I'm just going to sprinkle that in. And then I want to dissolve that in the water. So again, using warm water just dissolves it much easier. So I give it a nice little stir with my dyeing spoon. And you can tell when it's absorbed because you just can't feel any of that sort of grittiness on the bottom of the bowl. So now I'm going to pop in the yarn. So grab your yarn, and all I'm going to do is just put it in, and as it goes in, I'm just going to push it down. And if this water was cold, I think it just doesn't seem to want to go into the water as easy as if it's warm. So just push it all down, make sure that it's all fully covered, and then I like to give it a nice sort of squidge around just to make sure that it's all fully wet. Oh, and it's now you get that woolly smell coming up, which is nice. So we now need to just leave that to soak, to let the yarn get completely soaked all the way through, and for that citric acid to get all into the fibres of the yarn. So I tend to leave it about an hour really. You can actually do this the night before if you want to. Obviously the water would go cold if you're going to do that, but that's fine. So if you wanted to do it the night before, it won't come to any harm leaving it overnight. But really, I normally, what I would do is just soak it first thing in the morning, and then by the time I get around to dyeing it, it's usually had at least an hour soaking time. Okay, so our yarn's been soaking a little while now, and we're almost ready to start dyeing. So before we can put the yarn into the pot, we need to heat up some water. Now, with speckling, you don't need very much more water at all. That really is the key. The yarn needs to be sitting so that the top level of the yarn is just above the water, so that when we actually land speckles onto it, it's hitting the yarn, but it's not hitting the actual water. Because if it goes into the water, that's when it's going to spread. So we need to make sure that we haven't got really very much water in there. So at the moment, I've got maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of water in my pot, and I'm going to add some citric acid into that. I'm going to put in another tablespoon of citric acid. So into my pot here, which the water's just come in, as you can see, it's just coming up to the sort of simmering point. I'm just going to sprinkle in about, like I say, about a tablespoon of citric acid. Just give that a whirl around, and what we will do is when the yarn goes in, if I think there's too much water in there, then I'll just take some out. I've just got a jug that I use for my dyeing, so I will just scoop out some water if I think there's too much in here. So make sure that that citric acid is all dissolved. And now I'm going to pop in the yarn. So at the moment the water isn't boiling or anything like that. It's hot, but it's not boiling. I try not to transition the yarn from, for example, if your yarn is soaking in cold water, I don't like then to put it into really hot water because it can sometimes shock the yarn, which can cause a bit of felting. So I try and keep the temperatures, not too severe, transferring from the soaking into the actual dyeing pot. So I've got my yarn here still soaking. So what I'm going to do is just squidge out as much of the water as I can get out at this point. So you just run your hand through, and then before it goes in, I just give it kind of a little wiggle just to separate those strands out so it's not all in a clump. And now I'm going to pop it into the into the water, and as it goes in, I'm just going to sort of distribute it around. I've got gloves on. I mean, the water's hot, but I suppose I'm just used to the hot water. If you're not exposing your hands too much to it, it's fine. Now, I am going to take out a little bit of water. It's not bad. I mean, a lot of the yarn is sitting above, but you can just see there's little pools of water here. And if we get dye hitting those little pools of water, it's going to go straight into that bit of water and spread out into the yarn, and that will affect our speckling. So I'm just going to take my jug and just move this sort of yarn out to the side and just scoop a bit out. So now you can see, you can still see a little bit of water, but the majority of the yarn now is sitting above it. Do you know what? I'm just going to take out a little bit more because I'm just not convinced. There we go. And because you've not got very much water in there, you'll find that it heats up obviously much quicker because we've not got a lot of water. So we're ready now to start the speckling. So, you know, before we open any dye pots, it's time for the mask on. This is not very glamorous, but it's needed. Right, so the first colour that I'm going to be putting on is the landscape dye colour. This one's called Tan Bark, and this one is brilliant. I love these for speckling, so this is going to be the first. So this dye, I don't know if you can see, but it is very granular. If I just drop it like that, it's not like a full sort of powder, and that's why I think this is so good for speckles. So what we're going to do is we're just going to get a little bit on our brush and tap off quite a bit of it. We don't want hardly any dye on there at all. And then I'm going to take it over the yarn quite close, and you can see some's dropped on already, and that's fine. But I'm just going to move over the yarn quite close to it and just gently tap my brush. So just little taps all over. Can you see we're getting tiny speckles? But just work your way over, and even if it doesn't look like any dye is going on, it can sometimes take a second or two for the dye to sort of register on the yarn. So just go all the way over and keep close to the yarn. This, you know, this will stop it, first of all, distributing into the atmosphere too much, but also keeps it less clumpy. Can you see now how we've got lots of little speckles going on there? And there was, did you see, I mean, there's very little on that brush. It's very much a case of less is more if you want these really delicate speckles. It's already so pretty, isn't it? And if you want to, you can put a spot more dye on your brush. But I am trying to keep this really delicate. So now what we need to do, that needs to set. We don't want to touch that at all. So I've actually got it now on my lowest burner, and it is boiling. So I'm actually going to turn it off because it's plenty hot enough at the moment to set that colour. And I don't like keeping yarn on a rolling boil for very long. I just feel like it's going to damage the fibres, and it's plenty hot enough to set it. So I'll pop that heat back on when we actually turn the yarn. So that just needs to set. It won't take long. Okay, this has had just 5 minutes, and I've just tested it to make sure it's okay, and it's fine now. And all I do, if you just take a little section, just push it down into the water and bring it back up, you can see that that looks exactly the same as it did. So there's no sort of spreadage of those speckles. So we know that that top layer is now set. So we can now turn it over, because we need to repeat that colour on the other side of the yarn. If we were to only do that one colour on this top level here, there'd be a whole section of the yarn that didn't have any of this colour. So we need to lift the yarn out and turn it. So if you see now here, this side, there's hardly any speckles. Turn it around, and this is the side that we did with the speckles running through, but even on this side, this bottom section is missed because it's the other side of the yarn that was facing the top. So what I always do at the same time is just move that sort of center point of where the tie is. So just sort of lift it and move it. And this keeps the distribution, I find, as sort of random as possible. So now what I'm going to do when I pop it back in is make sure that I expose as much of the white yarn as possible to what's going to be then on the top. So as you sort of move it down, you can see this bit here has had quite a bit of speckles already, so just sort of turn the yarn so that we're exposing a different area. So at the same time, I'm just going to pop the heat back on just to keep that temperature up. It's still steaming, it's still really hot. And now I'm just going to repeat that same process with that same colour. Now if you wanted, you could move the yarn again a third time, just to be sure that you get in sort of speckles on, you know, through the whole of the skein. I'm going to keep it to just the 2 turns this time because I've got 2 of the colours that are going on there. If I was just using one colour like this, I would move it again. So now you can see we've got good speckles going on there. I'll just make sure my brush is sort of empty. We're just going to leave that now just for a few minutes just to set that colour, and then we can move on to the next one. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be repeating that process that we've just gone through with that first colour with the next 2 colours. So I've got another shade of brown, it's like a chestnut brown, and then I've got a sort of burnt orangey shade that'll be going in. So exactly the same as we've just done with that colour, I'm going to be doing with the next 2 colours. Okay, this is the second colour that's going in and I need to turn it now. So the heat is back on. I just kind of judge the heat. If I feel like it's boiling too rapidly, I just turn it off for a few minutes and then pop it back on again. So now I'm going to flip that over and just put some more of the second colour on the other side. And each time I'm doing this, each time I'm turning it, I'm looking through the skein to find areas that don't have very much dye on them, because I want to make sure that all through the skein has got speckles. It's nice to have different levels of speckling. Sometimes, you know, you might have an area where there's more, sometimes where there's less. Sometimes it's nice to have a little area where, you know, you've got sort of very creamy yarn. So I'm going to leave it at that for the second colour. And each time I put on a different colour, I'm using a different paintbrush. So now I'm just going to leave that another few minutes to let that final layer of the second colour set, and then we're on to the last colour, which is a gorgeous orange. There's definitely areas of orange there now. So I'm going to leave it at that with the orange. You can definitely see the orange now appearing. So I'm just going to leave that to set for a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to turn it for the last time. So again, I always just move that area there to make sure that we're constantly turning the skein. Yeah, that's all looking good. And even where, you know, you can see here from what we've got going on, we've got some areas that are lovely and speckled, but we've also got some areas where the brown has gone more through the yarn. And I just think it's beautiful. You know, you've got that combination of speckles, but also just a gentle sort of dyeing of the yarn as well. And it's just lovely. I think it's such a delicate, lovely way to dye yarn, this. Okay, So that's the last little speckles gone on, and I'm now just going to again the heat is on now, and I am just going to let that sort of simmer away for a good 5 minutes or so, just to make sure that everything is completely set, and then we can pop it outside just to cool down. So there we go, our yarn is dyed and it's now cooling down in the pots, which normally takes, it depends on how hot a day it is really, but generally about an hour. If you leave it for about an hour, it'll be cool enough then to actually rinse and then hang to dry. So when we come back in part 2, that's what we're going to be doing. We will bring our yarn back inside. I'm going to show you how I rinse it off, and then we're going to hang it out to dry. And then we can just wait to see the beautiful yarn once it's all dried and skeined up. So I will see you back soon to wash that yarn.
Goodness me, there's something special about the perfectly speckled yarns, I think. What is it, Kay, about it that makes them so...
I don't know. They're such a delicate thing, aren't they? And it does take some care. You've really got to be careful about it, otherwise it can not be speckled.
Yeah.
and be something else. If it sort of hits water...
So you've got too much water in?
Yeah, if you use too much water, then you're never going to get speckles, really. Because if it hits the water before it hits the yarn... the dye is dispersed. Yeah. It's got to, you've got to make sure that your little specks are landing on the yarn. So, the soaking wet yarn.
Amazing stuff, though. And to think we're only halfway there. Oh, yes. It's in part 2 when all your hard work, we hope, will bear fruit. I tell you what, yes. I can't wait to see a wizard's best friend all skeined up and ready to go.
Yes.
That's coming, we hope, later on in the show. Because now, before Kay in fact, how many... You've got 2 things, haven't you?
Yes.
So I'm afraid you've got to go first.
That's okay.
You're not too warm, my darling.
No, I'm okay.
Good.
It's not boiling today, so I'm okay.
In that case, I give myself full permission to ask Kay Jones, what's off your needles?
Oh, I need some blockers.
They're lovely.
Get those in a second.
I'll get
I'll get them in a second. I'll show you this one first. So the first...
I was getting the blockers for you.
That's fine. I'll have the blockers.
Oh, okay.
You can put them on the blockers for me while I talk about this other thing.
Okay.
So the first thing that I finished is my second little house hat that I was working on. This is the 3rd design in the Knitting University.
This has been our big thing actually this summer. You've done much more in-depth tutorials, really sort of nerdy, really deep.
Thank you for that, yes.
No, people like that. Yeah. That's good stuff. We've got hundreds, we've got over 200 tutorials now available, but what we wanted to do was do something just a bit more intense. And that's what you've done. You've done 2 pairs of socks. Is it 2 pairs of socks?
2 pairs of socks and a hat.
Yes, and the hat course is going to start in August.
August, yes, and not long at all. Start soon. But the samples that I knit both finished. This one I showed you last time. This one I hadn't quite finished, but I have now, and washed and blocked, and yes, it looks like Doctor Who's TARDIS. But it's called the Little House Hat, and who else could live in a smaller house really than Doctor Who?
That's true.
His house is tiny, isn't it? His little police box. So yeah, this is the Little House Hat, and I think it looks great with the darker colour behind it. The colour work just shows up beautifully. And this was the first one. So within the sort of course, I take you through the whole thing. I even make the pom-pom with you as well.
And what you did do as well, which I loved, was you went into a bit of detail on the yarn dominance, and you tried some different techniques. And
I did.
You're going to see all of that within the course, which is great.
I did. I tried on this second hat. I did 2 different techniques, one on the first set of windows and one on the second set of windows, and then spoke about the differences. I'm open to trying anything really to improve techniques and then to share it with you. So it was a great thing to do, and I think it looks lovely. I used a Hedgerow Yarns sock set, a DK weight sock set, and I had enough in the 100 gram skein to knit 2 hats, and I've just got a little chunk left. And then in the peachy coloured one, this was a 20 gram mini that came with the sock set. So for this one, I used a 50 gram skein from Coop Knits. It was the Coop Knits DK to do this, and I've got over half of that left. So I've got plenty to do, with something else with, maybe a contrast in something else. But I had plenty in the 100 gram skein to knit 2 hats. So get yourself some speckled yarn. If you've not got any DK weight yarn, I talk about when I start going through the process how you can use fingering weight doubled to use up some of your stash. And I think it's a great little thing to knit up a few of these for Christmas. I think they make great gifts.
Yeah.
And I'm thrilled to have 2. And maybe I will, if we know anybody. Do we know anybody who's a Doctor Who fan? I could.
Probably.
Yeah, I could give that to them. That'd be quite fun, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So, all finished. Dan Jones.
Yes.
What's off your needles?
Well, you're wearing it.
Aha. What do you think? I think it's great. I'll stand up so you can see it. It's really long.
Which she asked for.
I love how long it is. Look, the pocket's right down here. I'll stand on tiptoes. Oh. I can't stand on tiptoes. Look, the pockets are down here, and there's the bottom ribbon. So it's super long, which I love. It's more of a jacket, which is just what I wanted. I'll turn around. Look at the colourwork on the back. Can you see me in the thing? I love it. It's brilliant. So all that's left to do is to sew on the buttons, the special buttons.
Yes, which I can't wait to see.
And I'll show you those next time.
Now, I've spoken in depth in the final Return to Century Yoke, which came out yesterday, about the things I've learned knitting this. But to just sort of summarise, the whole yarn dominance thing, that's a massive one for me, because it was only through going through this process that I started to understand what it was and, start to explore different ways of getting around it. And over the course of, the time I've knitted this, I've definitely, started making inroads into improving my colourwork technique. What it has shown me too, though, is how, I'd never cast off the pockets. And, I'd never done anything like that before, which was honestly, I'd never knit a button band before.
I will say something about the button band.
Yes.
It's brilliantly knit, there's no problem at all with that. But the pattern tells you to bind off on the wrong side.
Oh, yeah, it's nuts.
Now, I did question this at the time in my brain. I questioned it thinking, not sure about that, but let's follow the pattern. So he did bind off on the wrong side, and I think he should have been bound off on the right side.
Because it's so much prettier.
So this is the wrong side bind off, and you can see all the pearl bumps. Look, the right side I think is way neater. Can you see here? And I wish I'd said to you, work another row and bind off on the right side, because I prefer that. But we followed the pattern, and
I suppose at the end of the day, a pattern is the design vision of the person who designed it.
That's true, yeah.
That clearly is what they thought. And if you, the funny thing is though about a garment is it's not likely that I don't think it's likely that you're going to knit another one particularly quickly. No. So yeah, you might, make a note and do it next time, but it's not like a pair of socks.
No, but you might knit another cardigan.
Yeah.
A different design, and you'd remember that for the next time you knit a cardigan.
You would, unless it said on the design,
bind off on the right side. But whatever it told you, I would just think to myself, right, I'm going to bind off on the right side.
Yeah, so it's a learning.
I get that, that edge rather than that edge. And I sewed down all of this on the inside.
It looks blooming marvellous.
Well, it doesn't. I hadn't, what I did was, where the little ends were poking out, I just tucked them in as I went and then just whip stitched up the edge. But when I got to here, where you've got 2 different colours, it was just too bulky to tuck them all in.
And also, you said you were worried.
Well, you could see it, from down here where I did it. You can see dots of blue showing here. I don't know if it's coming up on screen, but that's from where I tucked them in underneath, and because it's so bulky, they're showing through on that side. So I thought, right, when I get up here, I don't want that to happen because it's in a visual area, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I thought, right, well, I'm just not going to sew these bits in here. So I worked up to here, stopped here, and then started again up here to neaten up this bit here.
Yeah.
It just took, that took me ages, because I was making sure that I was, it still had plenty of stretch, I was tucking in and then whip stitching and just giving it a little pull, a bit more. Oh, that did take a long time. And, you know, the finishing of it, so I did the finishing. I wove in the ends, I sewed down the pockets, I sewed down all of that on the inside. It must have taken me 4 or 5 hours to do all that. I didn't do it, I did it over a few days, but it definitely must have taken me a good few hours. And you know, in the pattern it's funny because the finishing is like 2 lines.
Yeah.
So in the end,
such a huge element.
It doesn't mention anything about sewing this down. It makes it look like it's such a short job, I think, and then you start it and you're like, oh my goodness, just even weaving the ends in took forever, because weaving ends in where you've got colour work going on and strands takes me much longer, because I don't know if I did it the right way, but I went underneath the strand and sewed them through the stitches that were underneath the strands, so that took much longer.
The bottom line is, it's taken me to the point now, and I'm perfectly cool with this, because at no point up until right now have I ever thought what I'm going to say to you now, and that's this: the next item that I knit, I need to be in control of it from start to finish.
Yeah.
And so what we're going to do is Kay's going to show me how she picks up when we attach the sleeves.
Yeah, on Dan's cascades, we're at the point now where we need to attach the sleeves and it goes back in the round for the whole thing.
So I'm going to learn how to do that. And what that also means is I need to pick something. Obviously, I'm not going to knit the solio again, but something like the solio would be perfect because that doesn't involve steeking.
No.
Because I know I could never steek. Watching it, I'll be honest, it seemed easier than I expected.
Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't say never. I'm sure you could.
I'm years away from having the... if I'd spent a long time...
As well,
No, it's... I could not have cut the line as straight as you cut it.
Yeah, you're not very good with straight lines.
I've never used a sewing machine before.
Yeah.
I've barely crocheted, so doing the crochet thing.
That's true. Yeah.
So and we've done it. We've done it, and it's great, and it's wearable, and it's all lovely. But I feel like a fraud because But I do, and that's a fact, because I couldn't finish it off. It'd be like, cooking a really great meal and then not watching everyone enjoy it and sitting down and eating it with them. It's like the final little bit. It's like pointless. It would be like running a marathon but stopping a mile from the end and letting someone else finish the race for you. Well, what's the point?
Yeah, but you didn't have a choice. It wouldn't have ever got finished if I'd not helped him.
I wasn't at the point of... Years ago, I made the famous statement that I wanted to be a self-contained knitter. I am a self-contained knitter in so many ways. Now it's time for me to be a self-contained knitter with regards to the casting on and the casting off and the finishing of a garment. Finishing
garments. There's books being written about finishing garments, I think. I'm sure. I think it is it's definitely a skill to learn, isn't it?
This is the skill that I need to, by the end of the next process of knitting something, be able to see through. So I just need to make sure I pick something. Like I said, the solio would be perfect because, the challenge there really was the picking up of the sleeves and, yes, some weaving in ends at the end. So I don't know what it is yet that I'm going to be knitting. It's going to be, obviously, more colour work. It all will be revealed on the 20th of August, next month, with the first episode in my brand new series.
Wow, so you've got to decide before then.
Yes, and ideally we'll have the yarn and everything. But I'm thrilled to have created something with the right length sleeves, with the right length body, that definitely is wearable on a regular basis when it's cold.
It's lovely and warm. I think it'll be great for...
And it's not prickly, really.
It's not, no. I mean, I've got a little thin jumper on underneath. And I think on a cold day, I could wear it without, just with a short sleeve something on. But with a long sleeve something underneath, it's perfect. It does have a bit of a prickle, but nothing compared to, some of the really rustic yarns. Yeah. So
I want to see your lovely socks.
Yes, I finished a pair of socks. Now,
with marvellous heels. Look at those.
Yes. If you remember, I was doing an afterthought everything sock. Can you remember in the I've used a Nora George sock set that I bought last Christmas. It was called Dobby's Christmas Eve socks, and you got 100 gram skein. No, you didn't. You got two 50 gram skeins and a 20 gram skein. I hadn't used it, and this was the perfect time to use it to try out doing Afterthought Everything socks, and I finished them. So here are the lovely socks. Oh, hold them up without dropping them. And I think they've turned out,
they're gorgeous,
wonderfully.
Yeah,
I'm really thrilled with them. So I just used the pink for the heels, so I've got loads of the pink left, and I've actually got enough to do another pair of socks, but using the green as the main colour and the speckled as the contrast. So I think that would be really nice, and then again using the pink for the heels. So I might do that because I really love this green. I think it's gorgeous, this sort of like tonally greeny blue. I think it turned out really nice, and it was definitely a learning curve for me. I made a couple of mistakes when I started out, when I marked for the heels. And it was the way that I marked for the heels, because normally when I place markers, I put it on the right leg of the stitch, and I've never had a problem with that. But for some reason, I'd been watching a couple of tutorials, and within those, someone had put the marker under the entire stitch, so both legs. And I thought, I'll try that. It doesn't pull on the yarn as much. Maybe I'll do that. So I did that. But for some reason, it caused me huge confusion when I came to pick up the stitches, because I wasn't sure which leg. And, you know, the orientation that you pick them up as well seemed to influence it. And I somehow went off when I was picking up the row, and I ended up picking a few stitches that were on the row below. So when I came to snip the yarn and pull them out, my needle wasn't in the right bit, so I worked it out. I pulled out my needle, went back, picked up the right stitch and worked it out. But then what I did after that was I just got one of my sock swatches that I use as you know, when I'm working out designs, and I thought, right, I'm going to practice on this. So I did it on that, and I placed all the markers using just the right leg, and did it again, and it worked out perfectly. So something just went awry with the placing of those markers. So I know now exactly what I've got to do. You know, I've practiced again, it's fine. So I've actually cast on another Afterthought Everything sock, which I'll show you next time. That once I've completed the tube of that, I'm then just going to do a tutorial on how I cut in for the heels, how I picked up the stitches and cut in for the heels. So that'll be fun to do. But I'm really pleased with how these turned out. I think they're great.
Wonderful. I want to find out what our finished skein of A Wizard's Best Friend is going to look like, though. And there's only one way we can do that. That's by going back and enjoying the second part of my favourite colourways.
Welcome back, everybody, to part 2 of my favourite colourways. So our yarn has now cooled down, and we're ready to wash it, give it a squidge out, and then hang it on the line to dry. I like to always hang mine outside if I can. It dries much quicker, and I just like it. It's fluffier. I find that it's just a fluffier yarn if you hang it out to dry. Just like putting washing on the line, I prefer to do that. So let's bring it inside and wash that yarn. Okay, so I've got my yarn still in the dye pot here. I drained out the water, and I'm now ready just to give it a rinse. So in my bowl, I've just got some kind of warm water with a little bit of just gentle wool washing, and I'm just going to pop the yarn in and just let it hang out for a bit. Just give it a wish around, just to get rid of all of that citric acid and just any specks of dye that might not have stuck. All we're doing is rinsing out the last of the sort of products that we've used to dye it with. You can see the water's lovely and clear. We've got no dye going into it, so that's good. That should be fine. So now all I'm going to do is sort of squidge out most of the water. I'll just sort of put it all around it, just give it a nice squidge. And you can see again the water's lovely and clear, so we're not flushing anything horrible down the drains. And now we're going to hang it outside because it's a lovely warm day today, so it should dry quickly for us. I'm going to go and hang it outside on the washing line. Okay, so it's a good few hours later. It's a lovely, sunny, quite breezy day, so it's dried beautifully well and it's so fluffy. I don't know if you can tell just looking at it, but it just, as you know, I'm sure that drying yarn outside really helps it sort of look even fluffier and softer than normal, and I think it looks absolutely lovely. So all that's left to do is just to pop it into a lovely skein. Now before I do that, what I do first of all is take off the cable tie. I keep forgetting the names of these for some reason. And on these skeins, this is quite a short, it's got quite a short circumference compared to yarns that I normally dye. This is, you know, they're usually a bit longer, they sort of come down to about here. This is quite a short circumference, but you know, that's fine, it's no problem. So what I do before I skein it up is, I take off a couple of the ties. This has got 4 ties on it. And I find that they can, once we've done everything we need to with this skein, I don't find that you need to really keep as many as 4 ties on. And actually when it's skeined up, it looks a little bit prettier if you've not got as many ties going around it. So I find the one that's actually holding together all of the skein. And you'll be able to tell that because there'll be 4 ends rather than 2. So this one has just got 2. So that's just holding it together. That's just a neatness tie, if you like. So is that one and that one, so presumably this is the one, yes. So this one has got 4 strands of yarn coming off it, so this is the one that's holding the 2 ends together. So we leave this one in place. So I tend to put that one at the top of my hand there. So I just work out then which ones I'm going to snip off. And this one is almost down at the bottom here, so I'm going to get rid of this one and this one. So I'll just take my scissors and do this carefully. Obviously just make sure you're cutting the tie. So that's that one. What was the other one? This one over here. So I'll just take that one off as well. And now we can skein it up. So what I do first of all is just make sure that your yarn's all in the same direction, and then I make sure that I've got the 2 ties are here at the top and the bottom, and then we're just going to skein it up. And then to sort of turn it into a skein, I actually just pop it under my foot. I know some people do this, I've never been able to manage it, so I just pop it under my foot to skein it. So when you've got it like this, you then just twist back in the opposite direction. I just give it a pull to neaten up, and then we can let go. It looks gorgeous. And then we just need to pop one end through the other up at the top, like that. And we've got a beautiful skein of yarn. It's quite a short little cute. How cute is that? So here it is, a wizard's best friend. So there we go, our yarn is all finished. I'm super pleased with it. I think it looks gorgeous, and I'm so thrilled with the way the speckles have come out. You know, you've just got those tiny little specks appearing all over. It's so pretty. I'm definitely going to be knitting with one of these, very excited. So there we go, that's another of my favourite colourways, and who knows what I'll be doing next time, but I'm sure I will see you back soon for more.
Well, that was just gorgeous. Oh, yes.
Gorgeous.
Look at it. My goodness.
It is lovely. I do love it.
They want to see it.
Oh, sorry. I was just admiring it. Here it is up close. So you can see the little tiny specks. And when I was talking about the colours breaking, you can see it in this. You see this area of brown here? Can you see there's like a little sort of speck of orangey colour. That's what I mean when I say the dye breaks, because you do get some dye colours, and I find it happens a lot with browns in particular. I've got another brown, the jacquard one, which has got a lot of blue in it, and that breaks and you get little specks of blue. And to me it's like an added bonus that when it breaks, you don't just get that brown, you get another colour as well.
Yeah.
So it's, once you get to know your dye colours, you'll know the ones that tend to break like that, and they're really good to use for speckling, I find anyway, because you just get that added bonus of an extra little colour. But I think putting the other reason I put orange in, and I don't think I said it in the when we were filming it, but I think, don't owls have orangey eyes, or am I getting that wrong? In my head anyway, I'd got a picture of Hedwig with sort of orangey eyes, but I'm probably getting that wrong, and that's why I went for this sort of orangey specks as well. But I just think it looks so lovely with the browns.
Yes, it's gorgeous. It's
really pretty, and this base is gorgeous. Let's use that word again. It's really lovely.
That's good.
It's 85-15, 85% superfine, superwash merino, 15% nylon. So it's slightly less nylon than the sort of usual, but I think perfectly fine for socks. And I have knit socks in this base from a different dyer. Worked out beautifully. It's so soft. It's really squishy. Just lovely. And I think I'm going to keep these both for myself, because maybe I'll do something with them.
Lovely.
Together. But I think, it's such a lovely wintry colour as well. Wouldn't it be lovely for something wintry? So I was really pleased with how they came out, and I hope you enjoyed watching how I speckle.
Well, that is it now for the time being with my favourite colourways. But don't panic, because it will be back. The whole idea behind my favourite colourways was, after the excitement of this year, for want of a better word, we wanted to make sure that we had a show which we could, if the need ever arose again, that we couldn't get outside to do filming that we'd planned, we can pull this out of the bag. But also, though, I think you've got one or two little ideas for some specials and for next year. And so when you least expect it, suddenly Kay will appear with her potion books ready to dye another of her favourite colourways. Because the next time she returns, it'll be episode 157, and you'll be finishing off this season of the Bakery Bears Pudding Club.
Yes.
And we can't wait for that, because next time I'm back with Kevin, my sidekick, for another Walking the Dales. And let me tell you, this is the wildest walk I've ever done in my life.
Gosh, you were exhausted.
This walk was so wild, I looked at the map and I looked at the pathway and then looked at it in real life, and I'm like, there's no pathway there. That's just moorland.
Yeah.
Wait till you see it.
And you were so tired that night. Gosh.
This is a journey of epic proportions, and it'll be with you next time. So don't miss it. Oh, yes. Now, of course, it's time for the Endy Bits. Now, the first little Endy Bit from me is the next P.O.P Live. P.O.P Live July will be on Sunday, this Sunday, the 26th of July.
Yay.
At 2 p.m. British Summer Time. As usual, we'll share the link to the show if you can watch it live at 1:30 p.m. British Summer Time on our Patreon page, and the recording of the show will be available from 3:10. And if any of you are wondering what P.O.P Live is, well, I shall tell you very quickly. Every month we do a special show which goes out to all our Bakery Bear patrons. And if you remember, I mentioned last time, it's our Bakery Bear patrons that empower everything that we do. So if you enjoyed watching my favourite colourways, or you enjoyed watching Walking the Dales, hopefully you enjoyed watching both. If you would like to come, and it's less actually than, Kay said this the other day, it's less than a cup of coffee a month.
It is, yeah.
You could come and join the Bakery Bear community, and you will be helping us keep bringing you this show and everything that you see within this show. But also, you would get to come and watch the patron-only podcast.
Yeah, which is great fun, and we love doing it. We always have a laugh, and you know, we have chats going on because we can talk to each other because it's live, you know, and comments. We can see all the comments, and you know, it's more kind of off the cuff, and
yes,
it's really great. We love it.
Yes, it is. You know, it's one of those sort of things which brings together the whole of the Bakery Bear community in one sort of event that happens every month.
Yeah.
We've just had 3 shows where we've done our Meet the Patrons section. So we've been like travelling all over the world and like meeting different patrons.
Everybody's been doing little videos, and we got introduced to George Harrison.
Yes.
On that video.
Not the George Harrison.
No.
Very sadly.
Cutest dog you have ever seen in your life. He's amazing.
Yes.
He belongs to Olivia.
Yes.
And he's fabulous. We love George Harrison. Everybody was commenting, going, George Harrison, he's fantastic. He's the cutest dog.
So yes, please do come and join us in the Bakery Bear community, and you'll be with us on Sunday for the next patron-only show. Do you have any other Endy Bits?
No, the only thing I've got to mention is the knit-along that we've got ongoing, the Magically Enchanted Sock knit-along. There's lots of chatter going on in the Ravelry group, and there's already some finished items. So if you want to get involved in that, then just go ahead and have a look at the Ravelry group. It tells you all of the sort of rules. There's not really many rules. We don't generally have a lot of rules, do we? But basically, knit a pair of socks that makes you think of something magic or something fairy tale, anything along those lines. You can interpret it however you wish. And then the prizes, it runs till the end of August, and the prizes are a bunch of my hand-dyed yarn I showed you last time. So we'll draw for those kind of beginning of, first show, beginning of September.
I actually forgot to say what we must do on the pot on Sunday is we must do some half-yearly prizes.
We do need to do that.
So we'll do a most valuable player with regards to the runners and the walkers, and then maybe do a couple of prizes as well for knitters.
Yes.
That is, of course, for our Race to the Moon Cal, which is ongoing at the moment. Anyone can come and join in the walking and the running, and our Bakery Bear patrons can come and join in with the knitting element to that year-long knit-along. Anything else?
No.
Lovely.
I don't believe so.
Folks, thank you so much for watching. We're looking forward already to seeing you in 2 weeks for the next episode of the video show, when we will be walking the Dales once more. But for now, take good care of yourself.
Yes.
And we will see you next time for more.
See you soon. Bye.
Enthusiasm's not quitting for Dan and Kay, the Bakery Bears. They'll take you to fabulous places, of which they're favorites they'll share. You better buy a pattern, get yourself a Bakery Bear. You'll find yourself in a castle while watching the Bakery Bears. It never feels like a hassle to sit and watch the Bakery Bears. What's on your shelf or what's in your heart?